Welcome on in. We are here on the Toronto Sports Rush channel on the Bet Rivers Network for another live Leafs post-game show. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks alongside Pierre McGuire. And Pierre, this one ended up being Minnesota Wild taking a 3-1 win at Toronto and a little bit lackluster in moments, but we did hear a Go Leafs Go chant in the third period. Leafs were able to get this one within one for a bit of time in the third period, but overall just were not able to really take control of this game. I mean, what was your biggest takeaway from what we just saw?
Minnesota wore their work boots the entire game. Toronto didn't wear their work boots for the entire game. There were really good pushes in the second period, and there were excellent pushes in the third, but the damage had already been done. Minnesota was allowed to establish their game plan, which was work in the trenches, be strong on board play, be really strong with your matchup play. And for Austin Matthews, good portion of this game was played against Joel Eriksson-Ek, not an easy matchup. And it actually started on the opening faceoff. So I was surprised that Craig Berube didn't try to change out of it earlier. But when he did, Toronto started to get some more energy. But the biggest takeaway for me is you can see Toronto without John Tavares, without Matthew Knies, without Connor Dewar, without Anthony Stolarz, even though Joseph Wall played well, they're not the same team. When they have all those guys back in the lineup, they're a much different team.
Right, exactly. I mean, and you can see with the fact it's just generating offense. It's been just a drought. There's nothing going on. And that's from the top guys and then also down to the depth scoring. I saw a graphic sort of not very well because my feed wasn't very great. So like also Pierre, just think about the fact that I've watched this game like I was underwater. And so some of my stats might be a little bit off. But I did see the graphic being put up about how the depth scoring was not great with a lot of the guys on the Leafs. And so, I mean, in what way do you think the absence of guys like JT and a Matthew Knies have affected the scoring when you actually analytically kind of lay it out?
It pushes everybody back. So Pontus Holmberg, rather than playing as a second center, plays as a third center. Max Pacioretty, instead of playing as a second line winger, maybe plays as a third line winger. I could see that Craig Berube decided, you know what, I'm going to play a little bit more Max Domi, a little bit less Max Pacioretty as the game went along. Connor Dewar goes in the lineup. Maybe Ryan Reeves doesn't play as much, and maybe doesn't even play. So it changes the whole schematic for their team. I still think there's an organizational need going into the trade deadline for another centerman. And I really think there's a need for a pure power play quarterback, not just having five forwards on the ice. Now, people would say in Toronto tonight, why do we need a power play? We didn't get any power play chances. I get it. I totally get it. I understand. That being said, this is a good team. If they added another top center, and I'm talking about a top third center probably, and they added another power play defenseman, this team could be really lethal.
Right. And so they need to add pieces, but you mentioned the fact with their injuries, they haven't really had a healthy lineup for a lot of the season. They've been able to get by in certain circumstances. Right now, they haven't really been able to do much without people. So, where does that fall when you are consistently dealing with injuries, whether whomever it is out of the
Mm-hmm.
lineup? What does that like? How do you attribute dealing with that? Is it like an overall thing with the team that you need to sort of pinpoint, like, are we training too hard or is this going on? Or is it just sort of like a case by case basis? And then the second part of that is just if everyone's going to maybe continuously get injured, how do you even deal with that?
I think if it goes year to year to year to year, so let's say you have a 3 year period where you got tons of guys getting hurt, there's usually an internal evaluation, a debrief, and then somebody usually loses their job, maybe more than one person. I remember situations where that happened in Washington. I remember situations where that happened with the New York Rangers. I remember situations where that happened with the Montreal Canadiens. Just three that I can name off the top of my head, where the off ice conditioning people and the training people were replaced because there was this huge array of injuries that were taking place year after year after year. I don't think that's the case in Toronto. I think it's a little bit more bad luck and just the grinding. Let's also remember too, they're playing a different style. Craig Berube wants them to play more of a playoff style, more of a grinding style, more of a hitting style. When you play that style, sometimes the injuries happen. And I still have so much confidence in this team. I do believe, and I had a great talk with our good friend Keith Pelly today,
Oh,
who's the
nice.
CEO of MLSE, and they're really so excited about the way the management team is communicating, the way the coaching staff is communicating with the management team and the ownership group. There's nobody singing from a different songbook right now, Julie. It's really encouraging if you remember the Leafs hierarchy or their coaching staff. And because of that, I do think they'll make the appropriate moves going into the trade deadline.
Okay, so that is great to see that solidarity, the communication. We know in so many circumstances, teams that are on the same page and have the same vision. And as you mentioned, the guys are all playing the same way on the ice. However, I would say it felt like they lacked a lot of that identity in this game. And maybe that is just because of the personnel and they didn't look like a team that was, like ahead of the Florida Panthers, at least before the game in the standings, because Florida has that just relentless forecheck that comes at you no matter what. But you keep mentioning guys that they could add. Who's someone out there that you would have your eye on that could potentially be someone that they would have their eye
Well, it's a good question. I wouldn't have a name just because I don't dabble in that, but here's what I would
on?
say. If you could get an offensive center iceman who can manufacture and make the wingers around him better, manufacture offense, make the wingers around him better, that's something that probably would be on my wish list. In terms of defensemen, it would definitely be a power play type defenseman. And I know I am not afraid to tell you this because I don't think Barry Trotz would take it personally in Nashville, and I don't think the player would take it personally. I think it's a compliment to him. If I were Toronto, I would be calling Nashville, especially as they slip more and more out of the playoffs, and say, "What's the price for Roman Yossi? What
Hmm.
does it cost
Oh
to
my
get
God,
Roman
Roman
Yossi?"
Yossi on the
And
Leafs.
that's the player. If you were to ask me, what's a fit for Toronto? He's a fit for Toronto. He's an elite puck mover. He breaks your forecheck. He can handle major minutes. He can run your power play. He can shoot the puck through a wall. He's not going to be intimidated by big moments. He's been in a Stanley Cup final. I can go down the line of all the things. He's a fit. I don't think they're trading him. But if you ask me one name that I would love to have on my Christmas wish list for Toronto, he would be one of the guys.
Well, hopefully Christmas is coming a little sooner than the next Christmas that would be for the Leafs next year. It'll be on their Valentine's Day wish list, I guess. That was really really bad joke. Okay, that wasn't even really a joke. But when we look at defense, I know the guys on the Sportsnet panel were kind of grinding the gears of Morgan Riley, especially on that first goal, and we've talked about him this year, but that he hasn't really looked the same as kind of maybe who the offensive defenseman that we've kind of seen in the past. And I know we don't know what's going on, but some of the guys likened that maybe Morgan has stuff going on outside of the rink, or maybe something else is going on. And I see that too here with the Rangers. Like we see Mika Zibanejad not being the Mika that we know. Like maybe there's something else going on. Do you suspect something that could potentially like do you think it's maybe more prevalent that stuff off the ice does affect guys on the ice, like, as a whole?
Well, I won't address that to Morgan because I don't know. And I've only known Morgan as a really good kid. I watched him play in Moose Jaw in the Crush Can back in the day in old Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Same with
But
me, Pierre. I also am the female version of Pierre McGuire, so I have that memory as well.
that's good. My thing with Morgan is he was so used to playing a certain way for so many years, Julie, and now you've got a whole culture change. You've got different coaches, you've got different ideology, you've got different expectation. It's different. And so there's a comfort level that he used to have that I think he's out of now. And I don't think it has anything to do with what goes on away from the ice. I think it has to do with what's going on at the rink.
Mhm.
And I think the more he's surrounded with positive energy and the more he's surrounded with good coaching, which I believe Toronto has, I just think he'll work his way through it. I really do. There are a lot of guys, it takes time for, especially players. He's never been traded, but
Right.
he's played in the same situation for a very long time, whether it was with Mike Babcock or whether it was Sheldon Keefe and now Craig Berube. Like he's played in Toronto. This is the first time there's really been a major culture change, and it'll be
Yeah, that's
interesting to
a
see how it plays out.
That's a fascinating point I haven't really heard or thought of in terms of the situation around the guys, because we kind of, as I just mentioned, like, oh, what's going on with him? It's like, well, his surroundings are completely different, and especially with Ruby, they're um, it's for the best for everyone, but
Mhm.
sometimes that can kind of be taken different ways for different guys.
Yep.
And I'd say, like, what overall, I mean, I know people were kind of giving the fans a bit of difficulty in Toronto. And we know that it's unique crowd there. It's mostly corporate, but what do you make of hearing the fans have a "Go Leafs Go" chant in the third period? Do you feel like it was maybe intentional to kind of show, hey, we are behind you guys?
I think also too, though, the Leafs started a push. We talked about it. They didn't have a very good first period, and look, I give Johnny Hines in Minnesota a ton of credit. Nobody's talking about him as a potential coach of the year candidate. I think he's coached his derriere off.
Yeah.
Julie,
Yeah.
he's done an amazing job. Like they got a chance to be a home ice team in the first round of the playoffs. Nobody thought that was going to happen. There is not one person, not even John Hines' family, that thought they were going to be doing that, especially with the salary cap purgatory that they're in, still dealing with the Parise and the Suter contracts. Those come off the books at the end of this year. But he plays a certain style. It's a frustrating style to play against. They played a straight matchup game against Marner, Matthews, and McMahon, excuse me. And so, because of that, it's not an easy game, and they fell behind. So Minnesota can keep their game plan in. But I think the goal Leafs go stuff. I think after the team started to get going, they were trying to help them. They
Yeah.
were trying to help them. I really believe that.
And you mentioned the frustrating style. Like, in that third period, Toronto did generate more offense, and we saw William Nylander score, a beautiful goal. He's and a great pass as well. But he's an incredible player. But maybe what was the difficulty with Toronto just being able to either capitalize on their chances, or that what Minnesota was doing to be able to stifle that offense, so that 2-1 lead didn't that it felt like it was like a 5-1 lead at points. Like, it just felt like they just were not going to be able to tie that up.
Yeah, they squeezed the life out of the game, Minnesota. There's no question about it. You're spot on. So, truly, I think the biggest thing is neutral zone was hard to get through. It was almost like a swamp. And then when they did get through it, you get the puck in deep. There's guys on you right away. They're closing the gap. Their defensemen are long. Middleton's a long, strong guy. You look at John Merrill, long, strong guy. Brock Faber, long, strong guy. The one guy that's not really long and not really strong is Jared Spurgeon, but he's one of the better puck movers in the National Hockey League. So you look at it, it's hard. And then the best thing they do, and I'm going to give John a lot of credit on this and his staff. Jack Capuano's on that staff, and Jack is a tremendous coach. I work with Jack in Ottawa, and I think the world of him. His defensive awareness as a coach is awesome. They envelop the front of their net as well as any team in the league right now. So their goalie knows, just make the first save. There's not going to be a lot of whack and hack hockey, so the other team's not going to get a lot of second chances. And we saw that tonight against the Leafs. The Leafs didn't have a lot of second chances. They had a lot of initial shots, but not a lot of
Right.
second chances.
Yeah, it's such a great point how they're able to collapse on those guys in front of the net and just make sure that they're not able to get rebounds, broken plays, just have any kind of really strong net play at all. You mentioned at the beginning that Minnesota brought or had their work boots on, and Toronto didn't. Why do you think maybe, other than the injuries, why do you think maybe Toronto didn't have their work boots on?
I think they've been hanging around home too long. I know they were in Ottawa on Saturday night. That's kind of like a home game, too. I think now it's good to have a getaway day, and today's getaway day for them. You head out west, get some time together as a group. You got 4 games before the break comes for a lot of the guys, and then you just come back for the playoff push down the stretch and going into the trade deadline. But I think when you spend a little too much time at home,
Yeah.
you can kind of let your guard down. And I think that's kind of what happened with this team. They've lost their last 3 games, and I don't think it's because they played poorly. I just think they haven't been as sharp as they need to be.
I feel like that's what January is like, when you just like stay inside your house all the time and you don't go out because it's so cold. You don't do anything, and I mean, at least that's what it's like here. And I'm saying that, and you're the one that's in the snow, and I'm in New York. But yeah, it's good to get a change of scenery, change things up. And as we said, they're going to Edmonton and Calgary, Seattle, Vancouver. A difficult test for them going out west for some of these different teams, especially ones that maybe in the process of making some trades as we speak, or even just this week. But
Mhm.
what would be like when you look at this 4-game slate? What do you want to see out of this Leafs team?
Consistency, effort, goaltending, guys coming together, little attention to detail, whether it's face-off situations, whether it's penalty kill, taking advantage of power plays, not turning pucks over. I just want to see our game get refined, because what happens is there are three components to an NHL season. There's the part before U.S. Thanksgiving, there's U.S. Thanksgiving until the trade deadline, and there's the trade deadline to the playoffs. Those three. So now we're in the middle part of the season. When you get to the last part, that's when the drag race happens. So you don't have a lot of time to fix what you need to do. So now's the time to get it done.
Do you think any of the guys are kind of maybe looking, or could potentially fall into the trap of looking ahead past games like this into the break, when there is this break that's coming up? And as we remind ourselves and everyone else, like the guys on, I mean, they've had all-star breaks, of course, but that it hasn't been that long, and they haven't played in an international tournament. I mean, they haven't played in the Olympics since 2014. They played in the World Cup, but that was earlier on in the year,
Mm-hmm.
if I can remember. So it was in the
You
maybe it was in
you're
the
on. Yeah,
fall.
you're on it. You got it.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to remember like outdoors because I went to that Outdoor Killers concert before. And I didn't need a big coat in Toronto, so it must have been not winter exactly. So for some of these guys, this will be the first time that they've had a break like this in the middle of the season. Is there sort of the fallacy of falling into looking ahead past some of these games into a break?
I think if you had a younger team, the answer would be yes. I think with this team, Tanev's not a young guy. Oliver Ekman Larson's not a young guy. Morgan's not a young guy. You know, Simon Benoit's probably their youngest guy, along with Connor Timmins, and they're really not that young either. So I'd say probably not with this team. And, you know, Mitchell's going to the Four Nations. Austin's going to the Four Nations. Larson's going to the Four Nations. Like, they got guys going to play.
A lot,
You
yeah.
know, Willie's going to play. They got a lot of guys going to play. So I don't think they're looking past anything. I don't. And to me, the biggest thing with this group right now is getting healthy. They really, I believe when this team's healthy, and if management is as proactive as I think they will be, this team's going to be really good down the stretch. They're, you know what? They're in first place. I know Florida and them are battling it out. I get it. I get it. Florida's defending Stanley Cup champs. They've been in the last two final. You know, it's not like they're a bad team. Toronto's in a good spot. They're doing just fine.
Right. As much as we can sort of look at pinpoint different issues, we look at the fact that they are at the top of the Atlantic, which is good for them right now. Now, something interesting I noticed just during the national anthem was just, and maybe this happens all the time, but for in Canada, or for I guess Chris Tanev, he was so locked in on the Canadian national flag, and I was just watching that on TV. I mean, I wasn't there in the arena, but with Alex Petrangelo not gonna be playing, I don't know, I just got this, like, weird vibe that he was trying to manifest his Four Nations future.
I
What do you
I
think?
didn't I didn't see that. That's a good catch by you, young lady. I don't know if that will matter much with the decision makers, but the one thing I would say, he wouldn't be a terrible selection because he is a shutdown guy and he's an older guy and he's got a lot of experience. I still think Drew Doughty's probably the apple of their eye. I don't know how he played tonight because I was
Mm,
so keyed in on the Florida game. I keep hearing Evan Bouchard's name from the Edmonton Oilers as another guy, and I've also heard Mackenzie Weegar's name
yes,
as a
heard Uyghur
potential
as
guy
well.
as well. I think if Hockey Canada had a choice of a perfect candidate, it would probably be Drew if Drew was 100% healthy. I don't know how healthy he is or isn't right now. I've been
Yeah.
around so much, Julie, at all those international events, going back to World Junior, Super Series, Olympics, World Championship. I mean, he's a special player. You know that, and his relationship with Hockey Canada is unbelievable. It's off the charts talking about Drew Doughty.
Yeah, I mean, it would be such a resurgence also to see him playing in a Canada jersey again. It harkens back to so many pastimes of.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be great for us to have Drew Doughty see him play at the national level again. I just think we'd be really lucky to, because we've been able to see him do it for so long. But yes, again, I think that's, I don't know. In my opinion, it feels like a bit of a stretch for a guy coming back tonight to be able to make
Yeah.
the Four Nations roster, but. if he's doing well and they believe that he's got enough gas in the tank to be able to sustain a tournament like that. And I imagine maybe you can say it's like for some of these guys, the minutes that they're going to be playing aren't necessarily going to be as great as some of the others.
No, 100%. You're spot on. I would agree. There'll be some guys that'll load up on, and other guys, the guys deeper in the lineup. But I think they'll try to roll four. I don't think everybody will be just overwhelmed. It's a different kind of a tournament. It's not nearly as long. I don't
Yeah.
think it'll be as grinding as what maybe the Olympics will be a year from now in Cortina and Milan. But we'll see. Nobody really knows. This is the great unknown. This tournament. And I mean, no disrespect to anybody that's going, because I'm going to be there too, and I can't wait to go. But unless the Russians are there, unless the people from Czechia are there, and unless the people are from Slovakia are there, I think it's really unfair to call it best on best. I really
Yeah.
do.
Especially with how World Juniors has been going and with a lot of those different nations coming up and doing really well and having a ton of players on in playing in the NHL as well. So I guess just the last question before we go, the massive trade that went down on the
Mm.
weekend that we saw with Mikko Rantanen going to Chicago and then being flipped with Taylor Hall to go to Carolina, and then Marty Necas going back to Marty Necas and Jack Drury going back to
Colorado,
Colorado.
Colorado, you got it.
Colorado and Carolina. It's like two teams that could win the Stanley Cup that are that traded these guys. How do you think this influences the rest of the league in terms of how they look at their trades?
I don't think it's going to have much of an effect on what goes on in the West. I think the West knows what they are. Edmonton knows what they are. I think LA knows what they are. I think Vancouver's trying to figure out what they are. Vegas and Dallas, if you watched that game last night, both those teams know who they are. So I don't think it's going to affect the West much. Sure, some teams are going to try to make adjustments. I think Drury's going to be a great role player there. I think about, the potential of his line playing with Miles Wood and Ross Colton, three American kids, no fun to play against. They can all skate, they can all hit, and they can all cause trouble in a good way. So I think that's a really good move for Colorado. Marty Necas playing on a line with Nathan McKinnon, and it doesn't matter who the other winger is. It really doesn't matter who the other winger is. I've heard all this debate. Just those two guys are lethal. What's gone on in Carolina, that's amazing. Taylor Hall has an assist last night against the Rangers. I think you had a chance to see that up close and personal. And
I saw both of those teams beat
and
up on the Rangers this
Nico is what
weekend.
Nico is. Nico's one of the best power forwards we've had in the league over the last 10 years. He's just a special player. So that helps. I don't know if they're going to be able to sign him there or not. They tried to do that with Gensel last year, and he bolted and went down to Tampa. So, yeah, this is where I get a little confused, and I apologize for being long-winded. What precisely did Chicago get?
I know.
I know they got a third-round pick, and they paid money. What did they get? Somebody's got to stop the spin control in Chicago. What did they get?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you because I'm not briefed very well on that. I just looked at the players really and the teams at that point. But yeah, when you're looking at it, you had to go back and be like, oh yeah, Chicago's involved because Taylor Hall is involved, and then or else you'd forget that Chicago is kind of part of it, or else it looks like it's just Colorado and Carolina.
Yeah.
But I was just curious in terms of like such a blockbuster deal. If other teams kind of started to think, well, if we looked at this model, what could we do? Like this is a potential reality because we've just seen it happen. What would that look like for us if we were to do something like that? Like, do you think it challenges maybe the ideas that general managers even have about what their teams could look like this year or in the future?
Yes, I do. I think that's one of the bright things about the NHL right now. People have a cap, they can spend to it, or they can choose to save their money so they can go out and make moves like what we saw Eric Tulsky in Carolina make. It's an interesting way to look at it from your point of view, Julie, because I agree with you. I do think teams are always evaluating. They're always trying to see, will this work for me or will that not work for me? Will this work
Right.
for us or will it not work for us? So I think that you're onto something there. I really do.
Well, I did take a hockey scouting and general managing course with sports management worldwide in 2011 for 6 weeks. So I do have a little bit of experience in this area. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I've done my homework on my online course, but I will say before we go, with the Leafs having this 4-game road trip coming up in the West, if you were to if you're Craig Bruby or you're any of the management front office or the coaching staff, what kind of like point total out of those 4 games would you be happy with heading into this then break?
Love to see us get 6 out of 8 points. Love to see 6 out of 8 points. I think it's very realistic as well.
Okay, 6 out of 8. We will have to watch and wait and see. We have been having a great time here on our live post game show. We hope you have been enjoying Pierre McGuire's analysis as we have a look at the Leafs' loss to Minnesota. And we decided to coordinate our outfits. I forgot to bring that one up earlier on in the show. We are just in lockstep line mates, and we are teammates here on Bet Rivers. And we will see you guys next time for our next live post game show on Toronto Sports Rush. See you next time.